This happened when I was still a kid, around 11 years old. I lived in a small town with my mom, my dad, and my little brother. In the house across the street lived my best friend, Tyler. He lived with his mom, dad, and older sister. The focus isn't on my family, but on Tyler's. They were chaotic. The father was an alcoholic, constantly arguing with his wife. The mother was almost always in a bad mood. There was always something to stress about. And the older sister, she was going through that rebellious teenage phase. She isolated herself in her room, blasted loud music, and complained about everything. It was a loud, confusing, unpredictable house. But it had always been that way, for as long as I could remember. Until one night, something happened, and they were never the same again. I woke up in the middle of the night needing to go to the bathroom. As I passed by the window, I saw that the lights downstairs in Tyler's house were on. When I came back, Mrs. Mason was in the backyard. Probably the cat had escaped again. Wouldn't be the first time. I watched through the window as she called out the cat's name. The night was cold, the street drowned in darkness. She wore one of those classic mom robes from old sitcoms, and the sound of the wind rustling the trees was the only thing to be heard. Until a loud clatter of metal echoed from the back of the house. I froze. She hesitated, then decided to go check it out. Even just watching, a deep fear settled in my chest. A fear I couldn't explain. I felt she shouldn't go, that something was waiting for her, and that fear turned out to be right. From behind the house, Mrs. Mason screamed. Not just any scream, a scream of pure terror, and quickly it turned into pain. Something, or someone, had done something to her. She wouldn't stop screaming. The house, which had been dark, suddenly lit up. Mr. Mason flung the front door open and ran to the backyard. Then, his screams came too. Screams of despair and pain, just like his wife's. And suddenly, everything stopped. Silence fell. A silence so thick even the crickets didn't dare break it. The strangest thing was that, even with those screams echoing through the night, no other house seemed to light up. No one came outside. No living soul appeared. It was as if only I and Mr. Mason had heard them. The door to the house stayed open, but even with all the lights on, the inside seemed filled with a heavy darkness, like the night itself had entered the home. I wanted to get away. I wanted to close the curtain and run to bed, but I couldn't. It was like something held me there, frozen at the window. The only thing I could hear was my own breath, shaky and uneven. Then the lights in the house began to turn off one by one, left to right, from top to bottom. Tyler's room went dark, then the parents', then the living room, and finally, the kitchen. The night, once heavy, seemed calm again. The wind picked up once more. I could breathe again. It felt like I hadn't in hours. That's when I noticed. The living room light was back on, and there, standing in the window, was the silhouette of Mrs. Mason, still staring at me. I couldn't make out her face, but I knew it was her. The slam of the door echoed down the street. It was enough to make me step back from the window, run to bed, and hide under the covers. But even there, I could feel her watching me from across the street. All night long. I woke up the next day. Everything felt so calm. For a moment, I thought I had dreamed it, but my body still carried that strange chill, as if the night was still with me. I went to the window, as if something were pulling me there. The Mason house looked normal. Too normal. Mrs. Mason was in the garden, watering some flowers that, as far as I could remember, were all dry the day before. She wore the same robe as always. Across the yard, Tyler's father was mowing the lawn with a smile on his face. The same man who used to be sprawled on the couch with a beer bottle every Saturday morning. And the daughter, the rebellious one, the one always locked in her room blasting loud music, was now sitting on the porch, wearing a floral dress, brushing her hair, and reading an old decorating magazine. It looked like a scene out of an old commercial. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Mrs. Mason saw me. She waved, a wide smile from ear to ear. I closed the curtain and went downstairs for breakfast. My parents and brother were already seated. My mother talked about things from the market. My father played with my little brother, feeding him. And I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen. "Mom," I began, hesitant. "Didn't you hear anything last night?" They all looked at me. "What do you mean?" "Sounds from the Mason's house. Screams. I swear I heard them." She let out a soft laugh. "Must have been a dream, sweetheart." But my dad, spreading butter on his bread, commented, "Now that you mention it, their house has been weird lately." My mom nodded. "True. This morning, when I went to get the paper, they were, I don't know, too nice." "And no morning fights," my dad added with a muffled laugh. "Not even loud music from the girl," my mom said, grabbing the kettle. "They became the perfect family overnight." They laughed, but I didn't, because I knew something was seriously wrong with that house, and no one seemed to really care. They found it funny. But I knew what I had seen. Tyler showed up later, asking me to play. It would help distract me, or maybe even get me some answers. He was coming down the street, and behind him, in front of the house, Mrs. Mason kept staring at me while smiling. Next to her was Amber, and I swear I had never seen that girl truly smile before. But now she was smiling, just like her mother. Mrs. Mason asked her son where he was going. She spoke so calmly, so serenely, it gave me more chills than if she had screamed. Even from a good distance, you could hear her voice clearly. "We're going to the park, Mommy," Tyler replied, turning to her. That's when Amber opened her mouth. "May I come with you, little brother?" Immediately, my stomach twisted. Amber never wanted to leave the house, never volunteered for anything, especially not to hang out with us. Tyler hesitated, but covered it with a smile. "No need. We're just going to play a bit." They seemed to accept that, but as we walked away, I had that feeling again, the one of being watched. No one else was on the streets, but I knew they were still watching me. We got to the park and tried to play like always. We got on the swings, tossed stones into the pond, and even raced each other to the far side. For a moment, it all felt normal. Tyler was the same as always, laughing at the silliest things, making up stories about invisible monsters in the park, and talking about the cartoon he had watched last night. I felt a bit more at ease, because at least Tyler seemed to be the same. But something seemed to be bothering Tyler. He kept glancing around, like someone was about to show up. I used that discomfort to ask about last night. I asked if he thought his family was acting differently, and he just looked confused, asking what I meant. "You know, they're different. Way nicer and happier," I said, explaining the weirdness. I made sure to mention their smiles, those strange smiles. But he played dumb and said, maybe they're just trying to be a better family, which would be a strange thing to do overnight, so suddenly and abruptly. I mentioned what had happened the night before, Tyler's mom leaving late at night, the loud noise, the screams. I told him everything. Tyler just looked at me with a confused face. He said my dreams were always pretty weird anyway. That was the worst part. Not even my best friend believed me. Maybe it was a nightmare, but I'm sure it wasn't. Suddenly, everything went cold, and I got chills down my spine. I didn't know who or why, but I felt watched again. I tried to keep the conversation going, but that feeling was the worst. It wouldn't leave me alone. I gave in. I asked if we could leave, but even so, the feeling followed me all the way home. We didn't talk much on the way. I just wanted to get out of there. And Tyler seemed kind of quiet too. Maybe he was just tired, or maybe he noticed how uncomfortable I was. But he didn't say anything. I got home, had lunch with my family, and tried to go on with the day like nothing happened. But the feeling of being watched still clung to me, like it was stuck to my skin. The afternoon dragged on, and at night, I had dinner in silence. My parents talked to each other, and my little brother was drawing something in his notebook. Then it was time for bed. Again, I woke up in the middle of the night. Unfortunately, I knew what to expect. It was like something was pulling me toward the window to peek out. I moved slowly, hoping there would be nothing there, hoping I could just go back to sleep afterward. And I jumped when I saw Mr. Mason staring at me from his lawn. I quickly left the window and ran to bed, crawling under the covers, facing the wall. But I didn't know I would regret that. Everything was so quiet. I could hear my heart pounding, the wind blowing, my heavy breathing, and again that feeling of being watched, but a little different this time. I felt like the thing was close. I felt like it was right behind me. I heard a different sound, right behind me, the sound of wood creaking, and a chill ran through my whole body. I was panicking. It felt like there was a monster right behind me, and it knew I wasn't asleep. It was just waiting for the moment I turned, so it could attack me. The feeling was terrible. The noises wouldn't stop. There was something behind me. I was sure of it. It got to the point I couldn't tell if it was touching my back or if it was just my blanket. Then I felt something in my hair. Thin, small, something moving on my head. Curiosity took over. Fear consumed me. If I turned around, he would catch me. But if I didn't, he still would. So almost on impulse, I turned around. And there was nothing. No one. And what had touched my hair was a spider. Of course I got scared, messing up my hair trying to get the spider out, but I think I'd never been so happy to have a spider on my head. I turned my back to the wall again, trying to sleep, knowing I wouldn't be surprised again. The night passed. The previous ones had been strange, but the next ones were just as unsettling. I went to a rave in an abandoned factory. So my friend Liam gives me a call, tells me that he managed to get us tickets to one of those pop-up raves that's hosted in a weird location, like a sewer or a warehouse or something. This one happened to be in an old, abandoned textile factory near the edge of the city. Sounds sketchy, I know, but there's actually a good bit of funding and effort that goes into these things. This is to say that the final venue ends up being something passable, a level above an outright safety hazard. Honestly, I'd always thought these things were a bit lame, pretentious even. But I had nothing else going on that night, so I thought, why the hell not? We get there at around midnight, and it turns out to be a blast for as long as it lasts. 2 a.m. rolls around, and I'm drunk and extremely high in the bathroom. I'm sitting on the toilet scrolling through Instagram reels when the screaming starts. Sounds of mass panic. Then I start to smell the smoke and sober up enough to understand what's happening. I rush out of the bathroom into a mob of frenzied bodies, the smoke now heavy enough to make my eyes water. Try to find the exit, but it's sheer chaos, and I'm disoriented as hell. People keep running into me, and at some point I'm knocked flat on my ass, forced to crawl around until I manage to escape the crowd. At which point, I found myself kneeling in front of the makeshift stage. something now completely engulfed in flames. And there I saw him. A strange, inexplicable figure standing right in the midst of the fire. A young dude, maybe mid-20s, lanky frame, pale skin, dark and wild hair, bulging, fish-like eyes. He was wearing a t-shirt and jeans, holding a black camcorder up to his face, and showing absolutely no reaction to the heat. Even his clothes weren't burning up. He was just standing there and filming, calm as anybody could ever be. Filming me specifically. I guess it was hard to tell, but I'm pretty sure he was pointing the camera directly at me. I stared at him for what felt like no longer than a few seconds before the air had grown too suffocating to deal with. Then I turned, ran like hell out of there. I don't really remember making it outside, but I do remember collapsing on the grass and hacking up my lungs, my vision reduced to a field of blotted orange shapes, as concerned but disembodied voices called out, asking if I was okay, which I wasn't, at least not right then. I passed out shortly after, and then woke up in an ambulance, an EMT hovering above me. Liam was also there. I could see the relief in his eyes, which just as quickly turned into anger. He sighed. "What a nightmare, dude," he said. "Glad you're okay. But what were you doing?" I shook my head. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what the hell were you doing in there for so long? Did you fall down and twist your ankle or something?" "What?" I responded. "No, I just got caught up with the crowd." Liam shook his head again. "What? That's not possible, dude." "Why the hell not?" I was genuinely confused what he was trying to get at here. "Because you were the last one out." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" "You came out like 5 minutes after everybody else did. Even the DJ got out before you." "What?" I couldn't see how that was possible, but hardly had the energy to argue it. "What were you doing in there?" he asked me again. I shrugged. "Maybe I fell," I said. "Hit my head or something." By the time that the ambulance had pulled up to the hospital, I was coherent enough to refuse any further treatment. My insurance wouldn't have covered enough for it to be worth it. In any case, I felt fine enough. Lungs were still stinging a bit, but not so bad. Not worth the hassle. For the first few nights after the incident, the paranoia was something else. My head was being flooded with these messed up thoughts. Like, what if that guy knew where I lived? What if he was following me home at night? What if he was somewhere in my apartment right now, filming me through a crack in my closet or something? A hellish state of mind. Sleep was like pulling teeth. And the little that I managed to get was invaded by nightmares, so vivid and horrific that it was nearly euphoric to wake up and realize they hadn't actually happened. So I took to smoking and drinking before bed. I'm sure there's better methods out there, but I just didn't want to deal with this shit and wanted a quick fix before I started going insane. And it kind of worked. The paranoia began to ease up after a week, and sleep was starting to come in small increments, even without the liquor, though I was still smoking in order to stave off the nightmares. Another week, and I was starting to forget about it. It was just a messed up night. The smoke caused some hallucinations. I almost died. But I didn't. Now I'm fine. It's all good. Continuing to think about it is a non-value-added activity. Just forget about it and move on. Which I might have been able to do if I hadn't run into Cindy. Now I'd never met or seen Cindy ever before. So you can bet it was a bit of a shock when this tall, brunette, fitness model type comes over and sits beside me on the park bench while I'm staring at trees, sipping my Americano. She looked scared, worried, a mix of both. "You don't remember me, do you?" she asked me. I shook my head. "I don't think so. Where would we have met?" She sighed, as if me saying that had just confirmed something she really didn't want to hear. "The factory," she told me. I stared at her. Suddenly, every awful feeling was funneling back into my psyche at once. It was hard to say anything in that moment, but she seemed to be waiting pretty patiently for an answer, and so I forced one out. "You mean the rave? Yeah, I was there. Crazy shit, huh? Are you uncomfortable talking about it, after what happened to you?" Obviously I was, but I lied. "No," I told her. "Not at all." "Wait, what do you mean? What happened to me?" "Well, I tried dragging you out that night. I really did. Everybody else was running away, but you were just kneeling there. Kneeling in front of the stage. And you weren't moving." She paused, and I nodded at her to continue. "You were staring at something. Staring right into the fire. Like you were in a trance or something. I tried dragging you away, I really did. But you wouldn't budge. It almost felt like you were attached to the floor. It was kind of freaky." "How long was I there for?" "I'm not sure. At least like half a minute. I didn't stick around for that long, sorry." "And what was I staring at?" "What?" "In the fire. What was I looking at?" She shook her head. I don't know. I didn't check. The flames were hurting my eyes." I nodded slowly. This was a lot to process, and we stayed silent for a long time. "Are you okay?" she asked after a while. Were you injured at all?" "Not really," I told her. I looked at the ground and then felt her hand on my leg. "It's a relief, to see you." I looked up and her face was a lot closer to mine. "That you made it out, That you're okay." I tried to smile and then began stumbling over my words. Yeah, I guess." She laughed, and then so did I. She then told me to come up to her apartment later that evening. Said she'd treat me to some DoorDash. Of course I accepted. And even if a red flag had been visible in that moment, I had been rendered colorblind. So I go home, take a shower, brush my teeth, do what's necessary to give myself a fighting chance. Not that I was really expecting anything. I just assumed that she felt guilty about it all. And I'm also not one to pass up a free meal. I get over there at around 7, and she invites me in with this huge smile on her face, and I can see 2 large, greasy boxes of fried chicken on the counter. We hug. She grabs a couple of beers out of her fridge, and then we take all the food and drink over to the couch. We start watching Dune Part 2, but I'm hardly paying attention to it. Too many other things on my mind. We finish Dune, and then, to my surprise, she pulls out a VHS. "You like horror movies?" she asks me. Generally speaking, I do, but I still wasn't far removed enough from the incident to be terribly excited about the prospect of watching one. Which of course I didn't mention to her. I just nodded. "Hell yeah, I love them." She stood up and then walked over the television, and then reached behind it and pulled out a VCR. The thing looked ancient and, from what I could tell, didn't have any indication of any sort of brand on it at all. She blew a thick layer of dust off the top of it, and then went about setting it up. She then grabbed the VHS and slid it in before sitting back on the couch, resting her head on my shoulder. In any other situation, I would have been ecstatic, but right then and there, I couldn't be. The mood had shifted in a way that I really didn't like for reasons that I couldn't fully understand. The television turned on, staying on a black screen for the better part of a minute before plain white text flashed across the screen. Part 1. The opening scene was simply a shot of an empty field at night. There were some trees to the left, what looked like an abandoned farmhouse in the distance, and it went on for an insane amount of time. 10, maybe 15 minutes of this one static shot. It could have been a picture had the wind not moved the grass and leaves every so often. I made a comment addressing how strange it was. Cindy didn't respond. Finally, it cut to another scene. It looked like found footage of somebody walking through a dark forest. but unlike most found footage movies, you couldn't hear the breaths of whoever was holding the camera. They spent about 10 minutes walking through the woods until all of the trees and foliage had cleared out. Now the camera was focusing on a building, a factory. The factory. I didn't really react when I first saw it. I mean, there was no way. It couldn't have been the same one. I mean, how could it have been? Suddenly, I became hyper-aware of everything around me. The sounds and smells in the apartment, Cindy's grip on my bicep, any shapes lurking in the corner of my vision. The cameraman continued towards the factory, and once he made his way inside, there was no more debating it. This was absolutely the same place. I watched as they walked up to the stage, began pouring gasoline all over it. And then I could watch no longer. I ripped my arm away from Cindy and practically leapt off the couch. "What the hell are you showing me?" I asked her. She had this amused look on her face, as if she were surprised it took so long for me to finally snap. "What do you mean?" she said, a mocking undertone in her voice. "I thought you liked horror movies. Where the hell did you get this tape from?" She smiled, shook her head. "I just had it, silly. I've always had it." "What is that supposed to mean?" Her face dropped. The creepy smile wiped away, now replaced by something colder. "Sit back down," she said. "Your scene's coming up soon." "I'm leaving," I said, and bolted for the door, and then down the hallway, and down the stairs, then all the way back to my own building. Catched my breath in the elevator, then checked to see that my front door's still locked, because now the paranoia is invading every inch of my senses, then crack open a beer and pace around the living room. There was no way that just happened, I'm telling myself. But this is not a nightmare. I'm not asleep. But how can I really be sure of that? Dreams feel real in the moment, don't they? Then I remember the time trick and check my phone and see that it's around 11 p.m. I'm aware of it. I'm not asleep. "The cops," I start telling myself. "Call the cops. But what if they think I'm crazy? What am I supposed to tell them?" I got to the fridge and opened another beer, sip it and try to relax, get my thoughts together. That tape is evidence of a crime. She's in possession of evidence of a crime. I have a friend who's a cop, Jack, so I call him, explain what happened, gave him Cindy's address. He said he'd treat it as an anonymous tip and that he'd investigate it, give me an update on what he finds. This makes me feel a bit better, and I crawl into bed, watch some random videos on my phone until I finally manage to pass out. When I woke up, the sun was out and I was coated in sweat, my eyes darting across the bedroom, searching for something that may or may not have been there. A nightmare, I was assuming. Something horrible that I thankfully couldn't remember. I grabbed my phone, opened it up to see a missed call and a text from Jack. "That address you gave me doesn't exist. You sure you gave me the right one?" I text him back. "I might not have. Which address did you look into?" He replied within a few minutes, and then I traced his response to the address that Cindy had written down for me. Exact same thing. Then I gave Jack a call, asked him to elaborate further. "I don't know what to tell you, dude. That address doesn't exist," he told me. "There's some out there that are kinda close to it, but they're in different countries. I have no idea where you went that night." I couldn't really believe what I was hearing, so I confirmed it for myself. He was right. No address matching it, at least nowhere even remotely nearby. Then I tried remembering how I even got there last night, and I couldn't do it. I mean, I really couldn't. I couldn't remember searching up directions or walking there or even leaving my apartment. I told Jack that I'd talk to him later and hung up. Only one explanation for this shit. I'm going insane. I inhaled too much smoke that night, and now I'm going through some kind of psychosis. Cindy wasn't real. The cameraman wasn't real. I'm really just losing my mind. At least, this is what I want to believe. So I went about looking for a psychiatrist in my area, and then booked a consultation with one that had decent enough reviews. I'm headed there later today, I'll provide an update when I can, hopefully with good news.